Hello and welcome back to Podcast with a K. I'm your host, Carla with a K. You're listening to WECS 90.1 FM, twitch.tv/CarlyGirl, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. I am here in the virtual studio with an old friend from college, also a podcaster, also creative, also just generally a cool person. Welcome, Jake.
Hello, hello. I do, in fact, talk about things on a podcast sometimes.
On occasion.
On occasion, yeah.
I mean,
On occasion.
listen, you have a pretty successful career, which we'll get into in a second. But first, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for having kept up with the show, and likewise, I've followed your journey. I think it's really cool to see where all the homies have ended up, and it's honestly just an honor to have you here.
Thank you. I think of myself as quite the average person, so I wouldn't exactly that's not something that I'm used to or expect hearing, so that's cool.
Absolutely not. I'm not friends with anyone that's
Yeah.
just average. Everyone's super cool in their own way. But let's start at the beginning. What did we just listen to? We just listened to a song you sent us.
Fairly new song, yeah. Paris put out a re-release of one of their first songs, featuring Courtney LaPlante of Spirit Box, My House, off their debut album White Noise. The 10-year anniversary of that album was last year, and Paris is going on a 10-year anniversary tour coming up soon, I believe. I don't know the exact dates or the exact timeline for it, but yeah, it was really cool to see that song. It was one of my favorite Paris songs, and then to see it get re-released with Courtney on it, I was like,
Yeah, and
that's awesome. That's
it's
awesome.
so cool. And I mean, Courtney's having a phenomenal year already.
Oh yeah, I mean, Spirit Box and Courtney in general have been having a phenomenal past couple years.
Yes, this is true.
Anything back to Jaded getting Grammy nominated,
Yep.
getting the feature
Being
with Megan Thee
confused
Stallion
with
on Cobra,
Poppy.
being confused with Poppy more recently. Yeah, yeah.
Dude, I
It's
forgot about the
really
Megan
funny.
Thee Stallion thing, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
been crazy. And as much as I hate to give credit, that's all the TikTok effect, I think.
in part, yeah. I definitely think TikTok had a part in it for sure. I wouldn't know because I don't really keep up with
I
TikTok
was
that
about
much.
to say, I don't think
Yeah.
you are on TikTok.
No, no. Well, by
Not
association, because I host a podcast that has a TikTok account and has
right.
2 posts on it, but
You're not an active
not
fan of
not an
social
active
media.
TikToker.
Yeah.
I tend to work in the shadows, which is not something that necessarily correlates with being a podcast host, which requires a lot of social
Right.
media interaction and branding and public face. But I've made it work by having friends that help me do that. So
There we go. See, and this is the thing that I like about having these conversations with other creatives. I think the funniest part is if you ask any of us, like, oh, but like, what do you consider yourself? It's always introvert. Leave me alone.
yep,
If I'm not at
yep.
the microphone, I don't want to talk to you.
Yep, yep. I still live at home with my parents. A lot of my high school friends and just friends in general have moved out. I went a grand 6 weeks this year without hanging out with a single person in person.
Wow, that's kind of actually impressive.
Yeah, it wasn't until a little over a week ago that I met up with some friends for the first time this year. I made it all through January.
You know what?
Just
That is
go
so funny.
staying at home. I would hang out with my parents, my sisters when they were home, and talk to friends online, and I was having a grand old time doing it.
I actually this weekend went out, I believe, for the first time on purpose. Like I've gone to a place and happened to have run into a person, but
Hmm.
I went out on purpose, like with plans, like in anticipation for the first time since November for something that wasn't like a mandatory like family gathering or
Hmm.
somebody's birthday. And I was like,
Hmm.
man, who have I become? I feel like at some point in my life I was such a social butterfly and now it's like this is it. This is what I do.
Yeah.
I do the
Yeah.
podcast, I play video games, I
Yep.
work, and that's kind of like
Yep.
rinse repeat.
Yep.
I had an episode in which I was talking about how it feels like it's important to celebrate like small milestones and things like that because it's really easy, especially like you said as an adult, like all your friends have moved on like into their own like life paths as are you,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
kind of hard to like keep up that same routine of like, oh well, we're gonna do this together, we're gonna go see this, we're gonna,
Yeah.
you know, we're
Yeah.
you're so used your whole life to
Mhm.
living at the same pace as everyone else, and now because everyone's doing everything on their own kind of on their own watch, right, on their own clock, I feel like it's really easy to get caught up in the man. I have to do this every day, forever, for the rest of my life. This is it. What's next?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the answer, of course, to what's next is up to you, the
Mhm.
individual, right? But I think until you realize what's next, it's important to kind of remind yourself you're still a human person that has to do
Mhm.
things
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
really easy to get caught up in your work or, in
Oh yeah,
anything.
for sure. I've been very caught up in my work, and it's been a bit stressful, so to say, but
Yeah,
I'm making it happen, making it work.
for sure.
One of the things about like doing the whole freelance remote video editing thing is that I do have a lot of freedom and flexibility, but that's kind of a blessing and a curse. As in, if I don't want to work some days, I don't have to. That just means that the next day is going to be a lot less fun.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's kind of
So,
exactly what it feels like, especially because more than like it's funny because people are like, "Oh, well, like, do you have to work today? I feel like you're usually around at this time." It's like, "No, no, no. I'm around at this time because I wanted to be, but now I'm not going to see you for 2 weeks while I catch up on everything I was supposed to doing when I was there." Like,
yeah.
I show like I have sticky notes of everything that I have to do, and I always show
Mhm.
these. I'm like, I've been crossing stuff off, but I've also added an extra sticky note to the list. So you know,
My to-do list is basically turning on my PC, opening up Adobe Premiere, and seeing what projects I worked on the past 3 days, and that's my to-do list.
literally. And on top of that, of course, is like doing your own creative passions because, like I said, you also
Yeah.
have a podcast, and it's like
Yep.
no one's gun to the head. You have to do this. It's like a little
Mhm.
passion project.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's what's kind of nice about the podcast because it's like I started doing video editing and video creation as like something that I just enjoyed as like a hobby and something for fun. And then I started to turn it into a career and doing the podcast. And even though like the video editing that I do for it is fairly basic and just throw the recording in, throw up a couple pieces of text and graphics here and there, no major cuts or effects or anything like that. It's still a passion project that I can use something that I've turned into a job and make it seem fun as just a hobby again.
Yeah, I
But
feel
it's a
that.
good way to keep doing something that I've always enjoyed doing, but not in a I'm doing this for money or for work sort of environment.
Yeah. I was talking about this, I think literally just yesterday. I was watching like a new stream on Twitch. I was bored and I was looking for inspiration because I had hit major creative block on a project. So I was like, all right, let's go see what the other creatives are doing today. And I found a person that was working on Blender but also did art. And I was like, ooh, some little multimedia moment. And so I was just like lurking and just kind of chatting, and eventually like the conversation was like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, a little bit of everything, I guess. I think in short right now, I paint, I do design, and sometimes like photo and video. And the streamer was like, oh, sick. Well, it's if you have a portfolio, like, I'd love to see what you do. And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. So I like throw my link in the chat, and everyone's like comparing portfolios in the chat. It's really cool. Like you're seeing kind of what everyone does. And we eventually get around to mine. And on the side where he's like, "Oh wow, you have a lot of things listed." And I'm like, "Don't get overwhelmed. I'm a hobby hopper. I'll do one thing, I'll monetize it, I'll get bored of it, and I'll just start something new." Because that's the only way that I think, as like, especially as someone whose background is in new media in general, right? Like before new media was just any digital work, and then everything became specialized. So you can be specialized in doing motion graphics, in doing
Yeah.
captions, in doing video editing, when all of that used to be all in one, right? And so now it seems like I have 10 different things that I'm doing. And I'm like, well, when I started, this was all considered one thing. And then everyone was like, oh, you should separate these as skills. So like I'm like, don't get too crazy, all right? It's all the
Mhm.
same thing that I've done in the normal time that anyone has. I just if I get bored, I'll start something new. I don't want to hate my work. So
Yeah,
similarly,
yeah.
that's why the podcast is still fun to do. And whenever I stop doing it, it's because like I'll feel like I have nothing to contribute or nothing to say.
Mhm.
And someone's like, "Hey, so you're not doing your show anymore?" And I'm like, "Why you knew that I had a show this whole time?" Like for me it's just like I'm bored and I wanted to talk, right? But like
Mhm.
for other people, like you said, everyone that's like lurking in the shadows, it's like, well, where's the new content? I'm like, oh man, forgot there was a reason I was doing this in the first place.
Yeah, it definitely feel like there's sometimes where we'll put out an episode and there's not many interactions with the post or the episode or the stream or whatever, and it's like, that's fine. But then every once in a while, you get an episode or a piece of content that people do interact with, and it reminds you that hey, like we're making an impact on people.
Yeah, and even if
And
it's the one,
yeah,
right?
hmm
But you've
like
had some
especially, I don't know how much you wanted me to get into like my podcast now are
No,
feeling the same
100%. I
way
was gonna say
a
you've
short
had
later.
you've had some
But
episodes that have gone kind of crazy because you've been doing it for a while.
yeah, so we're coming up on 5 years since starting because I started the podcast basically as soon as COVID and the pandemic happened.
Yeah,
Um, so let me pull it up actually.
for sure.
Um, because yeah, we've been doing it for like 5 years and slowly iterating on it over and over. Our most viewed episode or our most viewed like monthly podcast, because we do like other stuff. We posted like album discussions and a couple
Yeah.
band interviews. Our most viewed episode, it's actually from the first year we did it back in 2020. Um, our October recap episode that we did way back over 4+ years ago now. But like some of our album discussion clips have gotten hundreds of views. One of our interviews on YouTube with an artist called Garden, he does like emo rap stuff, is close to 1,000 views on YouTube right now,
Which
and that's
for
like not
today, YouTube
insignificant
is
numbers.
no, for today especially YouTube to have that many views is a little bit crazy because unless you're, I don't know I don't even know who's big on YouTube anymore. It's like which kind of proves my point, right? Like YouTube has unfortunately like fallen into its own niche. So in order
Hmm.
for something to do numbers on YouTube, it had to have something
Hmm.
worth watching for YouTube to push
Yeah.
that in the algorithm. Because it's
Hmm.
not like TikTok or Instagram where it's all like recommended. It's not just
Hmm.
based on like who you follow and who follows you.
Hmm.
YouTube, I think, still has one of the only
People
pure
watch YouTube.
algorithms.
People watch YouTube with more intentionality.
Yeah, exactly. And in order to stumble upon something, it's because there was something worth watching, which I
Hmm.
like. I genuinely
Yeah.
have had such a like reborn interest in YouTube. Like I feel like a lot of us started with YouTube. That's how we ended up in new media. It was just
Hmm.
like the self-starter, like I want to create for myself type of attitude.
Hmm.
And it's crazy to see because similarly, like I'll look at like my clips and stuff and I'm like, we got 50 views today. That's kind of cool. And then every now and then there's a clip that like breaks 100, 200, and
Hmm.
upwards. And it's like, huh, people still watch here.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
cool.
we started doing more short form content for the Hivemind podcast, and we've been like doing experimenting with like there's a lot of formats in the gaming videos that I edit that I've tried taking from what's been working for stuff I've edited for other creators, and how can I apply this to my podcast? And there's been some success with it with some of the formats. I think the most successful one is the blindly rank X thing.
Yeah.
So in a lot of the games, it's like blindly rank these Pokemon or
Right.
blindly rank these whatevers. So I was like, okay, let's blindly rank these songs, blindly rank these albums, blindly rank these different bands. And some of those have had decent levels of success. Now, for the most part, it's blindly rank band that is already fairly popular. When we've tried doing blindly rank band that is
Yeah.
not very popular, those don't do as well. But
Right.
it's
People just want to
still
have someone to agree with sometimes.
yes, yes. That is very true. But it's still cool to see that like even though we aren't like a super well established podcast or anything, like we've been around for a while, but like we aren't a big name or anything.
Yeah.
It's cool to see that like people still will interact and care about some of these forms. And I also think it's a testament to like taking the work that I do as a video editor,
Hmm.
learning from it and applying it to my own passions, and not just like, okay, here's a creator that is already successful. He has a format that's already successful. It's going to succeed because it's been proven to succeed. And I'm taking inspiration from those ideas, applying it into my own idea, and that success is still being there. So clearly, it's not just clearly there's something that I'm doing that is also helping it succeed, and not just creator already has big platform, so it's going to get views
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And it's funny because I was going to ask you that specifically if you thought your work influenced your hobbies or vice versa, because I tend to use my platforms all as an experiment. Like anything I've ever
Hmm.
done in my own life has been a performance piece just to see what does well, and then I can
Hmm.
apply it to my work. But I'm kind of thinking that you might do the opposite. Your work is kind of what guides your creative process.
I'd say it used to be that like my hobbies guided my work, because like I started video editing when I was like 13 years old in
Hmm.
Windows Movie Maker, and slowly just
Hell
learned
yeah.
myself, graduated to Sony Vegas and then Adobe Premiere. Um, and I feel like a lot of what I learned from just doing experimenting on my own content is what gave me the skills to do work for other people.
Hmm.
But now that I don't have as much time to do work for myself, I'm learning more from my work and taking that into whatever is left of my free time to spend on personal projects.
Right. Do you think it's more technique based or content based?
Um, that's an interesting question. I want to say to an extent it's more content based
Mhm.
because it's a lot of taking a format that has already been proven successful in a different niche and then just changing the subject matter.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas the technique in both sort of like whether it's a gaming video or if I'm creating a podcast and editing for a podcast, it's like ultimately you are taking footage and you are presenting it to an audience that needs to be entertained.
Yeah. And you know what's so funny is I think that for a long time everyone that was trying to make content was kind of guided by these like big corporations that kind of set the tone for what it was.
Hmm.
You know, people used to love top 10 videos and now you don't ever
Yep.
see those, right? You see
Hmm.
it, like you said, the blind reactions are kind of still big and that's been a thing for about 10 years now if you follow
Hmm.
YouTube trends closely enough, right? But they're just now hitting short form platforms because,
Hmm.
you know, those kids are growing up a little bit behind the times,
Hmm. Yep.
even though everyone's seeing that as like the trailblazers, right? And nowadays, even I see a lot of it started with gaming videos. The did you know if you do this, blah 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 blah, and it was usually like Minecraft videos. I think like
Yep.
did you
Yep.
know if you wear diamond armor and you go into the Nether, whatever. And now you're seeing that format for cooking videos on Instagram,
Hmm.
and I'm like, you know what? Respect. I'm glad y'all caught up, but it's so weird seeing that be pushed by like new kind of creatives
Hmm.
that are trying to tell other people how to be successful. And it's like, you really want to be successful? What's YouTube done? What did YouTube do 5 years ago? Translate that into TikTok and Reels. You've got your formula right there.
Hmm. If I was to counterpoint that, I would say that like 5 years ago is like when Mr. Beast was doing like the hyper like hyper paced, super fast, you have no time to breathe sort of editing style. And I feel like that's mostly phased out. I don't feel like that's nearly as successful as it used to be. But
I'll give you
I
that
feel
one,
like
but I
it
also think
probably
that's
well,
Mr.
like that's
Beast's fault.
also that's yeah, yeah, that is definitely Mr. Beast's fault. And also a very specific sort of style of editing that like
Yeah.
that's not entirely a counter argument to the entire point you made. Just
I'll
to
yield on that though,
like
because I
yeah.
think the editing style has changed a lot, I guess. The
Hmm.
content maybe is kind of what's driving it, but the editing style, you're
Hmm.
right. Now I feel like it's a lot more, it's supposed to come across as real, right? You're supposed to feel like the people that you're following on
Hmm.
TikTok and Instagram are your friends, and that's why they're
Hmm.
sharing these secrets with you. So
Hmm.
I'll concede that point.
I have no other counter arguments to make against what you were saying, but that did come to mind.
No, that's a good one. I don't know. I think the thing that I have to like wrestle with a lot personally whenever I'm trying to consume content is that not everyone is a professional and not
Hmm.
everyone has been doing it for years.
Hmm.
Um so like I feel like with that has to come a lot of grace for other creatives in the
Hmm.
space. Um, for example, there's someone that I follow on Instagram who used to be a part of the Fine Brothers network years ago, on their reaction shows, right? And
Hmm.
now he does videography for I think Loud Luxury. And he recently posted something about like download my secret like PDF to find out how I found success. And I was like, you know what? Let's see how this kid found success because in my perspective, he was successful because he already had a leg up by having been in the
Hmm.
industry, right? And what his like PDF said was actually interesting because it didn't resonate with a lot of the little like advice videos and things that you see just around. His main thing was like basically like specialize, identify your like target audience and your target clients, which I was like, okay, yeah, we've seen this before. But what kind of really um surprised me, I guess, to see was the fact that like with the identify the target client, he was like reverse engineer your job and your work to be like what they will eventually notice and come to you for type vibes. And I was like, oh, that's actually crazy smart.
Hmm.
But that's kind of more like client driven creation in comparison to like what we're talking about, where it's like, you know, your hobbies kind of inspired
Hmm.
a spark to create while you're still doing your own thing. And I think it's really interesting how like this generation specifically treats it in such different ways. Because now my question to you is, if you had to kind of identify how you do your work, because you do freelance video editing mostly in the gaming space, right?
Mostly, yeah, yeah.
Do you do it based off of who you want to work for, what kind of editing you want to do, or what content you want to be editing about?
I would say that it mostly came from like I grew up watching a lot of Minecraft, Pokemon, Nintendo gaming sort of videos, and that's what I ended up editing because like those were the games I was interested in playing. And eventually, like through my own work, I managed to get connected with people that were doing that sort of content. So it was more natural of I was doing this for fun. Somehow I get these creators that need editing to notice me, and then that's just kind of how it's been. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, honestly.
So like basically you're saying that it was the content specifically that like drove you
Mhm.
to want to do this. Like you wanted to be doing like Minecraft and Pokemon and Nintendo. Like that was your original like kind of hook.
That was my easiest way in.
Right.
I knew that I just like generally enjoyed video editing and being involved with video creation in whatever aspect.
Hmm.
So when I graduated college, I was like, all right, I need to start making some money. How am I going to do this? I leaned on the strengths that I knew I already had, which was gaming videos, um, and just tried to see if I could make that work. And by some combination of luck and skill and hard work, I made it work. But I also think like there's a part of me that was like, I've always wanted to edit music videos. I think that would be awesome.
Oh yeah.
So like if the whole gaming video shtick didn't end up working out, I totally could have seen myself pursuing that niche and working for like record labels that have production teams or something like that.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily like I specifically wanted to do gaming videos. It was I want to edit videos, and gaming videos happen to be like the
Uh,
path of least resistance.
yeah. It was more accessible, I guess. And it's also really accessible as a freelancer, right? And you get to keep
Mhm.
the work from home lifestyle if that's something
Yep.
you're
Yep.
chasing.
Yep.
Could you
Yeah,
ever see
I
yourself
do
going
enjoy
corporate?
I do think I will go corporate at some time.
Yeah.
It's just right now living at home and being able to not pay rent is very appealing. So
Dude, that's huge. That's huge in this economy. Shoot.
in this economy, absolutely. Yeah.
We got to wait for the next
I'm
housing crisis to actually be like official and then
yep, yep, yep.
move forward. I saw a post.
I've
I
been
keep
saving up a
seeing,
lot of money, so
I mean, there you go. I keep seeing posts that are like, what was I doing in 2008? Being an idiot in school instead of buying property? And it's like, man, that's so relatable.
yeah. Yeah. But
Unreal.
like I do think that at some point I'm going to want more stability than what I have right now because right now I've got a number of connections with different creators, but if a bunch of them decide, hey, or I'm not going to do content anymore, or they just don't even say anything, or they want to move on to work with a different editor, it's like,
Yeah,
well, it's like I feel fairly secure that a lot of people I'm working with are in it for the long haul, but that's not forever.
for
So
sure.
it's like eventually I'm probably going to want more security and it's also like I've got my whole life ahead of me. I'm only 24.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
am I going to be want to be doing this for the next 30 plus years? Probably not. Am I
Exactly.
enjoying it right now? Absolutely. Do I think I'll be doing it in a year from now? Probably. I don't know for sure because a year is a long time. But um right now it's working for me. Right now I'm enjoying it. So I have no plans on changing the status quo, so to say.
That is I'm gonna use that as a sound clip for this episode because that's actually so real for a lot of different things. And I think that a lot of people kind of lose sight of that sometimes whenever you're making like your 5 year, 10 year plan. But it's like, you can't forget to enjoy what you're doing now
Mhm.
if it's what you originally wanted. Because I feel like a lot of people get to that point where it's like they finally get offered the opportunity that they were chasing for so long. But it's like once you have it in your hand, what do you do with it? Like
Mhm.
again, people get too caught up, I think, in the what's next. And I'm guilty of that. I'm so guilty of that. But I like what you said, a year really is a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We have reached our halfway point. So I think it's time for a little song break. So introduce this next song for us because assuming this has something to do with your podcast, and if not, that's a crazy
Yeah,
coincidence.
yeah. I mean, really, the only gimmick is that it's a song called Hivemind, and my podcast happens to be called the Hivemind Recap Podcast.
Is there any
That's the only
connection? Is
tie-in
there
there.
any
No, we have
correlation?
no connection with the band. It's just the song popped up in my recommended feed a few years ago, and I was like, wait, this song kind of slaps. And it's called Hivemind. That's funny.
My favorite thing is how simple decisions are made. All right. In that case, here's Hivemind. That was Hivemind. Funny enough, we are here with Jake from the Hivemind podcast. That's crazy.
That's me. Yep. Yep. Just I figured if I was gonna be a guest and we were gonna be talking about the podcast a little bit, it'd be funny to get the song called Hive Mind on there. There's a couple other songs that have like Hive Mind lyrics, but as far as I'm here, let me check my playlist real quick. Is
Yeah,
that the
just in
only song
case.
named Hive Mind in my playlist? There's two. There's two.
Oh,
There's a
who's
second one, but the other one is Hive Space Mind, not
ah?
Hive
That's
Mind
not
one
the
word.
same. That's not
So
the
it's not the
same.
same. Yeah. Shout out Hive Mind by Inertia for being the only song named Hive Mind in my playlist that has 7,328 songs.
How many?
7,328.
I thought I was doing great at 4,000. Gosh darn it.
I've been building this playlist since 2016. We're almost a decade into the
Dude,
playlist.
I've had my Spotify since I was, I don't know, at some point in middle school, whenever you still had to sign in with Facebook, and I just didn't want to save
I did not
anything.
even know about that.
Dude, I didn't want to save anything to my playlist because I was scared it would mess up my Spotify radio, because back then the radio would actually give you songs suggested on what you were listening to, not what they wanted you to be listening to.
Mhm.
So I've missed like years worth of music, and I'm like, if only I had been saving songs all this time. Because I feel like I only really started using Spotify properly maybe a little bit before college. And so
Mhm.
I remember, so Jake and I met in Radio Club, I think. And we were talking about
I
our
think so,
Spotify
yeah.
playlist once, and everyone was talking about like how many songs they had and like how many playlists they listened to, because some people are kind of like elitist of a certain genre, whereas there was a lot of other people who were kind of like, I listen to everything including experimental jazz. So like the two polar opposites.
Mhm.
What really got everyone to like shut up and unify was Jake saying, yeah, I have like 7,000 songs saved. Just because we were like,
It wasn't. It must have been like 2000, like at the start of college. It must have been around there.
no, I feel like it was still a lot, because I remember everyone being like, wait, no way. And everyone like immediately pulled out their phone and tried to see how many songs we all had saved. And whatever the number was, I remember you still had more than anyone by thousands. And we were like,
Because
well,
like whenever a new song comes out, it's like, is it a good song? All right, into the playlist you go.
yeah. Well,
It's basically
because
just a catalog of like my listening history for the past 9 years.
that's so fair. But the question then is, do you sort these songs by playlist, or is it all just one mega
It's
playlist?
just one big playlist. I don't sort it at all.
See, I think that's probably why then. That's gonna be like my scapegoat as to how you have time to know so many songs.
Well, a lot of these songs I haven't listened to in years. Because like if I'm ever listening to this playlist on shuffle, there's 7,000 songs in there. What are the odds it lands on that one? Here, let me just scroll to a random point in my playlist. What are the chances that it plays nothing at all by Traceless? I wonder if I can find the last time that I listened to this song. Hold
Oh,
on.
dude, I wish it said that.
Let's.
So Abby in the chat
Well,
actually.
I have my Spotify connected to Last FM, so I might be able to
Oh, you might
actually
actually be able to
figure
pull
that
that
out.
up. So
Yeah.
Abby in the chat actually did an experiment this year to see how long it would take her to listen to all of her saved songs. And I think from literally from January 1st until somewhere around February 10th, maybe. Abby, if you're here, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how long it took her to listen to every single song alphabetical order, just to ensure that she could make it through. And so now I'm like, that does seem like a fun experiment. I wonder.
So my main playlist with 7,328 songs, it's 431 hours of music right now.
Oh my goodness.
So I don't know. That'll certainly take me a while.
Okay, say that you're awake and listening to music for 8 hours a day. Say you only do it like when you're working, although you wouldn't because you're
Hmm.
editing. Say that you're
Well,
doing it
I
for.
do listen to music while I'm editing sometimes.
Okay, well, say that
Like
you do.
if I'm rough cutting through footage, then I usually have music in the background at low volume.
If you were to listen to 430 hours for 8 hours
Hmm.
a day, it would take you at least 50 days. And that's not even taking off for weekends. So it would take you about 2 months to make it through
Yep.
front to back, which is
Yep.
kind of insane.
Yeah. But if you also think about it, I've been building this playlist for close to a decade.
True.
That's like on it how that's what like 5 days worth of music a year roughly. that comes out too.
I'm going to just assume that math is right because I don't want to open the
I don't
calculator
know.
back up.
I haven't been in a classroom in many years, so my math could be off.
I was gonna say
But
I've been in a classroom, just not in a math one. But okay, so then the question now is your podcast. You said you do
mhm.
music reviews and band interviews.
Yes. Yep.
So tell me a little bit about that. And I think the question I want to start off with is the music y'all discuss. Is that specifically stuff that you would listen to, stuff that we would find on your playlist, or is it just stuff that's more interesting to listen to and discuss?
So the way it works is that we do a monthly recap format. Since there's 4 of us that we all discuss music as a group, as friends, it's we call kind of meet in the middle, so to say,
Mhm.
with what music we want to discuss. So at the end of every month, we come together, we make a shared playlist, and we're like, all right, everyone add anywhere from like 5 to 8 songs that you want to talk about from the month. And then we'll throw in a couple of big notable album drops that we listen to throughout the month as like the main topic of the episode. So, for example, for the month of February here, if I'm scrolling through my playlist, there's 2 big albums that came out this month that I think we're going to discuss. First one by a band called Winona Fighter, called My Apologies to the Chef. It's their debut album. I've been kind of obsessed with it since it released a little over a week ago. And then the other album is from Architects. They're one of the biggest metalcore bands in the world. They have a new album coming out this Friday. So those are probably going to be the 2 albums that we talk about. And then there's like there's a bunch of other songs. Like obviously, I'm listening to a ton of new music with my 7,000 song
Of
playlist. So
course.
I'm just gonna pick out like what are like the 5 or 6 songs that I've spent the most time listening to that I think are gonna have like longevity with me, and we're gonna talk about those. And a lot of the times, it's like I have songs that I've listened to throughout the month that my other 3 friends. Some of those songs they have listened to, sometimes they're listening to those songs for the first time the day that we record the episode.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask is how much overlap is there between the 4 of you? Because even
So
if you all listen to the same genre, I feel like it lends itself to a lot of open discussion.
there is a lot of open discussion. So a lot of the times there's albums that only 1 or 2 of us have heard, and it's like sometimes like I have an album that ends up as like one of my favorite albums of the year. None of the other 3 really connect with it, so I'm just gonna take 10 minutes to talk about it entirely myself and why I love it so much, and the rest of them just are like, oh, you know, good for you.
Right.
And
That's
then other
fun
times,
for
like I'm on
you.
the other end of that is like my pal Derek, he has by far the widest music taste of anyone in the group. He had Knocked Loose and Charlie XCX in his top 2 albums of the year last year.
That's amazing.
So
The
like
range.
sometimes we just have stuff like that.
Right.
And
Just
we're
the
just
wild
talking about
card.
like pop stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Or like sometimes like I mentioned our most successful interview we did with the solo artist named Garden. He does like emo rap sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Derek and Jacob are both really into that. So we got him on for an episode because I don't know, we made it work. I don't remember exactly how it was like 2 years ago at this point. But his music, it's very like emo rap, like kind of hyper pop sometimes. I don't love most of it. There's a couple of his songs that I really enjoy.
For sure.
But overall, it's not my favorite. But Derek and Jacob love it, so I'm not gonna say them. No, I don't listen to this artist. You are not allowed to discuss garden
Right.
music on the podcast. So and that's kind of the whole point of it being like a monthly recap format of here's what the 4 of us have been listening to throughout the month,
Mhm.
and it's not always going to be something that all of us agree on. And there are exceptions where all 4 of us will listen to something and be like, that album or that song is amazing. That definitely happens. But it's supposed to be a monthly recap is like just not it's well, it is focused on the music. It's also focused on each of our own individual music tastes and like here's what's helped us get through the month in music, and we want to maybe there's like smaller bands that I've been listening to that aren't wider known yet. Let me talk about them. Maybe a couple people will listen to the episode and discover it and create that like chain reaction, so to say. Like I'm not expecting it to, but if it does, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Because
all
I
it
think
takes
there's a
is
lot of
one.
bands that like one of my favorite bands I discovered a few years ago, Letter Sent Home. They're a small German band. They have currently 13,000 monthly listeners on
Amazing.
Spotify, and they were my most played artist of last year.
Wow.
Um,
Just like that. How did you find them?
yeah, YouTube.
Just stumbled
They
upon them.
yeah, I just stumbled upon them on YouTube, listened to their EP Misery Loves Company, and I've listened to that 4-song EP. I've listened to it front to back dozens of times. I've listened to my favorite song in that EP, Waves, I've probably listened to like 200 plus times at this point. It's like I could go on and on about that EP, and I did on the podcast because like I was so obsessed with it, and I was like, this is one of my favorite things I've heard in months, and I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
Um,
So what are the highlights then whenever you are listening? Because I feel like with smaller artists, what I like is that they don't sound like anyone else, right? I think
mhm,
the really cool part about an artist finding success and getting with a label is, more money, more tours, more production, etc. But I
mhm,
think what sucks is that their sound changes a lot to appease what the label wants. So my favorite thing with new artists is just give me something I've never heard before, whether it's their voice, whether they want to put
mhm.
a, cowbell into a rap song. Like, I don't know what it is. Give me something that I've never heard before and I'm sold. I don't care what it is. I'm sold. It has to be good. I'm not going to listen to
Yeah,
clowncore, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
what
Mhm.
is your hook whenever you're trying to find new music?
Am I enjoying my time listening to the music? It's really as simple as
It's
that.
that simple.
Like I love me some angry metalcore that is screaming in my ears and makes me want to punch a wall. I, I as I said, Let Us Sent Home, my favorite artist of last year. Their songs are like dark pop alternative with like lo-fi bass drops in some of them,
Oh, wow.
and it's like I love both. And then you get like the radio rock with a band like The Warning. They're like one of the rising stars in like hard rock music. It's three twin sisters out of Mexico.
Hmm.
I've been absolutely in love with what they've been putting out in the past year. And then I'll be listening to that. And yeah, I don't know. It's like, am I having a good time with it? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, I'm going to add it to the playlist. And if it's something that I'm like repeatedly listening to throughout the month, it's going to be something I want to like talk about on the podcast because it's like
For
left an
sure.
impact on me.
I will say I am kind of picky about lyricism. If the lyrics are
Yes.
if the lyrics are repetitive, if the lyrics are saying nothing, if there's no like instance of clever wordplay at least once in the
Mhm.
album, I can't stick with it. And that's like a
Yeah,
very like
that's
petty me
yeah.
thing, I think, just because of the whole
No, no,
comms
I don't
side of it. But
mhm. So, given that our whole thing is a monthly recap, obviously we also do an end of year recap as well,
mhm,
where we list out not like our favorite songs and albums of the month, but the entire year.
yeah.
And they're like our favorite episodes to do the entire year. But we also do some superlatives for like other categories that aren't just the music itself. So, one of them is like most improved artist, an artist that going into the year we thought were just mid or didn't really care for them at all or actively didn't like them, and by the end of the year they ended up being an artist that we really enjoyed. For me last year that was Bill Murray.
Okay.
I hadn't really connected with Bill Murray that much in the past years. His album last year, American Motorsports, that was awesome.
Yeah.
It was an awesome album. Better Hell, um, Talking to Your Ghost, Empty Handed, all phenomenal songs,
Yeah. This is
and
personally
made
for
my
selfish
Spotify
reasons really
Wrapped.
good because we talked about Bill Murray at some point before.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. But one of the other categories we do is our honorary Worst of the Year award, and we can give this out to our least favorite song, our least favorite album, or our least favorite lyric, which we have done in the past of a lyric that has been so abhorrent that it has left an impact for all of the wrong reason.
Do you remember any of the highlights? Because I'm so intrigued by this.
I have a spreadsheet. Let me see if I can
Oh,
figure this
please.
out.
Now we're getting into the real tea right here.
Um, let's see. Okay, yeah. So technically, this song, I had it as my runner-up for least favorite song of last year, but in big part of it comes the lyricism as well. Um, so it's this band called One Morning Left. They're a Finnish metalcore party band sort of thing. And they released a song off their album Neon Inferno last year. And the song is called Michael the Knight.
Okay.
And um, the chorus goes, Michael the Knight fights the crime. Na 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 na. Together with Black Cool Car. Michael the Knight fights the crime. Na 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 na. Together with Black Cool Car.
Awful. I love it.
And you hear that chorus, I think, the better part of 5 or 6 times throughout the song.
Oh my goodness. That's already ridiculous for a chorus.
It's
Only
one
for it
of
to say
those songs
nothing.
that like so there are some songs that are boring and like okay, new artist comes on the radio and you haven't heard it, and after like 20 seconds you're like, all right, I'm gonna switch the station to something else because I want to listen to something more interesting. This is one of those songs that was so actively bad that I wanted to hear the whole thing, because I was like, I was intrigued by what I was listening to in just nonsense.
Yeah,
Like,
of course, of course.
and that's just one of the examples. I think Derek has had some. He's definitely noted worst lyric as his award for worst of the year as well. Um, but and one of the other, we also do like a best of the year for like best lyric, verse, chorus, like vocal delivery as well. So we also do highlight the lyrics and choruses that have made a positive impact as
It's
well. But
intricate. It's intricate.
yeah, yeah. hmm I can try and pull up what my winner for that was
Yeah,
last
for
year if
sure.
you're
We have to have the
curious.
contrast. We have to know.
Yeah, so my winner for the best lyric verse chorus, my favorite lyric verse chorus from last year, goes to "A Spark" by Relica, which I actually just got my physical copy of in the mail the
Oh,
other day.
no
I have the CD
way.
back there. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Um, so one of my favorite songs of last year, and it's specifically the outro to the song. So it's like this little dropout bridge section before like an instrumental breakdown at the end of the song, where it's like a spoken word section. If I had the hindsight to know I made the right move, maybe I'd be gentler and less cruel. I want to look back in 10 years and feel sincerely that this was a risk worth taking. I have nothing else left to prove. I wish I could make promises and speak certainties and be true, but truth be told, I'm terrified that this path could take me from you. With tunnel vision, I'll sacrifice my heart to find the power that comes with fear, just like the light in a spark.
Man, that's crazy, specifically in contrast with the previous lyric. How
Yeah,
can people be
right?
capable of writing one thing but also the other?
Well, there's billions of people on this planet. Not all of them are lyrical geniuses.
Not all of them are wordsmiths, which you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is the best example we've ever had on the show of the duality of man. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what you said you started this during COVID, right? What
Yes. Yeah.
exactly can you pinpoint the moment in which y'all decided this is what we need to be doing?
So COVID sent us home. I was doing my radio show on campus at the time, and I was really enjoying it. And it was like, well, I don't know. Like, this was back before we thought. I think it was going to be only like home for a month. And I
Mhm.
was like, I still want to talk about my music because I really enjoy it. Would anyone be interested if I made uh like 10-minute YouTube video on here's what I've been listening to,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
just like that sort of thing. And my pals that I've been friends with, they responded to that tweet saying, "Hey, let me in on this."
And it just
And
like that.
it just happened. Like we got in a Discord call some afternoon in, I want to say, April of 2020, and I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't listen to podcasts at the time, really.
Right.
It was just like, okay, we're gonna talk about music and I'm gonna upload it. Okay, cool. And over the years, we kind of dialed in the format a little bit, and like the branding and graphics and like the schedule and all of that kind of just slowly came together over the years. But yeah, it was really just the pandemic stopped me from doing my radio show and talking about music that I was listening to each week. And I was like, I really like talking about new music that I'm listening to.
Mhm.
It's something that like I actively was doing without like a public facing camera anyway. Like we have our Discord server, we have our call where we send new music to each other on a daily or weekly basis with one another.
Yeah,
And it's like,
it's
even
just
if
an
we didn't have the
activity.
podcast, we'd be doing this anyway.
Might as well
And I
set it
think
to an
that's
audience.
why, yeah, I think that's why we've been doing it for so long, is because, I mean, I do a lot of like the organizational stuff. I don't think if like Derek or Justin were the ones that had to like record and do all that, they probably wouldn't still be running. But because we all enjoy talking about and sharing this new music anyway, it's like we were going to do this anyway.
Yeah, why not do it?
Why not do it and like try and spread the word? And it's given us the opportunity to talk to some of these bands that were seemingly out of reach,
For
which
sure.
is pretty cool. Like when we started this, like I never expected it to turn into a show where we would do monthly music recaps and artist interviews. It just
Right.
so happened that as we were doing these monthly recaps, sometimes we would tag the bands on social media. They would notice, be like, "Hey, thank you for the kind words" and all that. And eventually, it was like, okay, we want to. The artist wanted to talk to us
Yeah.
and like get on the podcast, and it was like, okay, that's kind of cool.
I think it's really
And
fun, and it's
yeah,
also kind of humanizing, right? Like, at the end of the day,
mhm,
everyone is
they're just
also
people.
everyone is also just a person,
Mhm,
and, you, I think, grow up even if you're someone like you who said wasn't, like, into podcasts, or if you're someone who listens to podcasts and has, like, their favorite hosts and their favorite episodes, right? Like, someone has to do it, so why not you?
mhm,
And what's
yeah,
other than that, like, what's actually stopping you from doing it, right? Like, anyone
mhm,
can learn to edit, anyone can learn to interview. Anything that you have to do technically is
mhm,
only a skill you have to pick up, but at the end of the day, it's
yeah,
like, do you want to do it and are you having fun? And that's it.
mhm, and yeah, I'm still having fun with it. So
Hell yeah.
through the
We love to
podcast, we
see
all
it.
managed to meet up in person for the Friday. We were so close to recording an episode in person.
What?
The one time all four of us, so Bad Omens did their Concrete Jungle headliner tour, and we all flew down to Virginia for the show. Since two of us, so I live in Connecticut, Jacob lives in Toronto. Derek and Justin live in Virginia, so they're already local to the area.
Mhm.
And Jacob and I flew down there to the show. And the show, it was like the first weekend of December, which is usually when we would be recording our like November recap or our first end of year awards episodes. And we are like, boys, we need to do this podcast in person.
It has
Like the
to
timing
happen.
is so close. For a multitude of reasons, it fell apart and didn't happen. But
Yeah.
like in part due to me having a radio show and then turning it into a podcast and then us continuing to do it, it helped me build these friendships that I've been friends with these guys for like obviously we've been doing the podcast for 5 years. I've known them for 7+ years at this point. I've known Justin for close to a decade at this point.
Sure.
And after so long, finally getting to see them in person, it's like these aren't just online friends, they're like real friends, you know?
Man, it's
These
the
aren't
way
just
that
strangers on the internet.
yeah, it's the way that there's not a unique experience in this world because I feel like I've had this exact same conversation. Not specifically because of the podcast,
Mhm,
just because of being like I think just an online creative and like getting involved with stuff like this. I have also gotten the chance to interview some artists like on the show, but it was also through a friend that I met online and I had her on the podcast. And after that conversation, I was like, you know what? I feel like we could be like pretty decent friends. And so we've obviously kept that friendship going. She's the one that I run the music publication with. And so it's really cool how just sitting down and talking to somebody for an hour kind of opens so many doors for you
mhm,
just because it's like everyone's just people, right? Whether it's a random on
yeah,
the internet, whether it's a band that you idolize, whether it's someone that you've never met before and you're hopping on a call for the very first time. And that's kind of what I personally love about podcasting. It's very much like just train of thought. Even if you have a topic, like you have your like themed like music recap episodes and
mhm,
my theme is just I want to have a conversation, give me your favorite songs and tell me
yeah,
what you're thinking, right? Like there's a
mhm,
different format I think for everyone, but at the core of it it's just that people kind of long for connectivity, right? Like
yeah,
people just want to feel like they're a part of a conversation, and I think
mhm,
that was the huge silver lining of COVID because that's when everyone really got like into podcast. I think like of course
yeah,
it's been a kind of long running medium, but I think that's what sealed the deal for a lot of people. It's just like, I don't know, just want to hang, just want to yap.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I have like obviously we're both like pretty introverted people, and talking to people is not exactly something that's comfortable for us. So it's like when I can just talk to a camera, speak into a microphone, there's no like real in-person audience. Like I don't have to worry about the fact that someone that hates metal music is gonna listen to this sort of
Yeah.
thing, you know? It's like I can speak into the microphone, talk about something that I'm passionate about, and then through the powers of the internet, maybe someone else that is passionate about the same kind of music stumbles across it.
Yeah, you're speaking to your niche.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
yeah, that's pretty cool. That's such a great
It's
way
like
to put
if
it.
I were to walk up to like if I was going to like a couple years ago, if I was just walk up to random people at the dining hall on campus and be like, "Hey, do you like let's see, what's a random band with like not that many months? Do you like the band Colorblind? Have you ever heard of the band Colorblind? How many people in that dining hall have heard of the band Colorblind before? Probably zero.
You could have asked this about Spirit Box or Bad Omens literally 5 years ago,
Yeah,
and no one would know what you were
yeah,
talking about.
yep, yeah. So it's like, but through the power of the internet, there's millions of people,
Yeah.
and
And through
yeah,
word of mouth,
it's
those bands have
word of mouth.
specifically
Yep.
grown like crazy, and so has the
Hmm.
genre. And now it's
Yep.
like, that's you're right. Thank you, internet.
Yeah. I think one of the coolest things, we were scheduled to interview a band and the lead vocalist of a band called Caskets.
Ooh.
They released their debut album back in 2020. The interview never ended up happening, But this was right around the time they released their debut album, and right now they are sitting at 1.4 million monthly listeners.
You have to get back in contact with them because that's crazy.
Like we like had the email chain, we had the date selected, the guy just didn't show up, and then we were never able to get it rescheduled.
Man, that's tough.
And
That's
it's
really
like,
tough.
to think that we're just a group of friends that likes music, and you're telling us that we get the chance to talk to these people that are playing 1,000+ capacity rooms in front of giant audiences touring around the world. Like, what did we do? We're just people. But then again, they're also people.
Well, hear me
at the
out,
end of the
right? Now
day,
there's
too.
traveling podcasts, so who knows? Maybe tomorrow it's your podcast that's traveling around the world and all the artists are asking you to
Yeah,
be on the
yeah.
show. Well, Jake, as our time here draws to a close, I want to say thank you so much for being on the show. You're listening to WBCS 90.1 FM, Twitch, or
Thanks for
every
having me.
platform possible. Carla with a K for Podcast with a K. Signing off. Do you have any final closing remarks, statements, shout outs, etc.?
Can I shell?
The floor is
At
yours.
Hivemind Radio _ on Instagram and Twitter /X. And Hivemind Radio recap on YouTube if you are interested in any of the stuff that I talked about with my podcast for this episode. We're going to be recording our February recap sometime in the next week, probably, as it's coming up on the end of the month. So, yeah, that's
Tune
about
in
it.
because
Thanks for
there
having
will
me.
be a
This has
quiz
been...
in the March episode of the podcast. I'm going to ask y'all if you'll listen to Hivemind. All right, what song are we signing off with?
Fair warning, our episodes usually run for like 3 hours, so
listen,
it's
for a
recommended
true
that you listen
music
to them
fan.
in like, I mean, when you split it up 3 hours across like a month, it's doable. It's doable. Final song is going to be Automatic Sun by The Warning. The closer off of their album from last year called Keep Me Fed, and one of my favorite songs from last year. I was in love with it from the moment I first heard it, and it has not fallen off for me.
All right, well, in that case, without further ado, here is that. Y'all have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll be back new nonsense and new guests next week.